Looks like we have about 10 people. I guess we can start, and I'm gonna share the slides on my end, and then you just tell me when to stop and when to, move forward. So, okay, let's start. Hello, everybody. I'm Anissa Haji Mumin, the Assistant Commissioner for Immigrant and Refugee Affairs at Department of Employment and Economic Development. We hold these forums first Tuesdays of the month from 3 to 4:30 p.m. Thank you for joining us today. The agenda, I dropped it in the chat function. Minnesota Department of Housing is going to be presenting to us first, and then we will hear from the Department of Public Safety talking about the violence, prevention and resources available to victims of violence with Beef 2 Adams. And then we will close it with the Minnesota Department of Revenue that will present their new outreach programs and restaurant outreach initiatives with the public. For networking purposes, please put your contact information, and for note-taking purposes as well, your name, the organization you're with, your title, your email address. And we'll go ahead and start. We have Cheryl Rice and Casey Kier. Am I saying your last name right? Who is going to be presenting from the Minnesota Department of Housing. And I'll be sharing the slides on my end. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. See Windows. Let's see. All right, so I'll start from the beginning. Can you see Casey and Cheryl?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Looks great.
Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Anissa. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having us here today. My name is Casey Kier, and I'm the Assistant Commissioner at Minnesota Housing, and I lead our single-family homeownership division. With me here today is Cheryl Rice. She is the Community Outreach Representative on our Community Initiatives team. Can you go to the next slide, Anissa?
Yes, let's see here. Okay.
Perfect.
Right.
At Minnesota Housing, we believe that housing is the foundation for success and stability, and we know that we can't do this work alone, so we collaborate with individuals, communities, and partners to create, preserve, and finance housing that is affordable. Next slide. For our agenda today, we'll share a little bit more about Minnesota Housing and what we do. You'll hear more about our home mortgage programs, down payment and closing cost loans, and home improvement loan programs. We'll also talk about federal funds that will be made available through the Home Help MN, Homeowner Assistance Fund program, and funds that are also currently available through the Rent Help MN program for homeowners and renters that have been financially impacted by COVID-19 to help them pay for past due rent, mortgage, and associated expenses. We'll also share some details on how you can access more information, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. Next slide. Minnesota Housing is the state's housing finance agency, and this year we're celebrating our 50th anniversary, so we're really excited about that. At Minnesota Housing, we work to prevent and end homelessness. We finance new and improve existing rental housing and housing with services, and we support successful and sustainable homeownership through financial wellness, homebuyer education and counseling, home mortgage and down payment assistance programs, home improvement and rehab lending. We also do the new construction and rehab of affordable housing for single family and manufactured homes, home improvement lending, and foreclosure prevention. So we run the gamut of the continuum of preparing for homeownership and then supporting people through successful homeownership. In 2020, we had our largest investment in housing across the state, with over 1.6 billion in total investments, serving over 72,000 households statewide. Minnesota Housing is a mission-based financial institution with almost 5 billion in total assets. So if you were going to rank us against all of the lending institutions across the state, we'd be the 5th largest. With that background in mind, I'll turn it to Cheryl to talk about our programs.
Thank you, Casey. Hello, everyone, and thanks again. We're so excited to be a part of the forum today. I'm just going to give a really brief overview of some of the programs that Casey mentioned in the agenda. And if you have questions at the end, please feel free to let me know. I presented this presentation to Nisa, and she's like, "Are you going to need extra time?" And I go, no, I think I'm going to get through these slides very fast. So if you have a question, just let me know and we'll go from there. So Minnesota Housing, we believe that home ownership is possible. Next slide, please. We have some unique mission-centered goals that are listed here on the screen. We want homeowners to be successful. So we like to educate and we support education programs for buyers. We require a minimum borrower investment, which we'll talk about a little bit more into the presentation, so that folks can afford to purchase a home. And also we have strategic priorities where we're servicing the entire state. We have over 100 lenders in our network. And our goal is always to reduce the state homeownership disparity rate. We have the lowest in the country, and we have goals in place to correct that. So I want to just start with talking about our first mortgage program and down payment assistance. And that's usually why people use Minnesota Housing, is because we offer some great programs for down payment, closing cost loans, and then being a housing finance agency, we have access to exclusive products that other lenders don't have. Again, we have 100 lenders in our network. The social impact of it is that when people get Minnesota housing loans, the interest that we earn on those loans, we are able to put back into the program and to support other future homeowners. And we also believe in success. So we really preach education and require homebuyer education prior to purchase. Next. How do you access our program? The borrower goes into our website, which I'll give you some details on later. They pick a lender. The lender closes and funds the loan, and then U.S. Bank, who's our master servicer, is a servicer. So Minnesota Housing still owns that first mortgage. Next slide, please. And this is kind of a transition slide, so you could just kind of click through that, Anise. Thank you. And I'm also getting a thing from my computer that my internet is weak, so let me know if you don't hear me or I blank out.
Sure, thank you.
For down payment assistance, there's 3 under startup, which is targeted to low and moderate income households. And then you have to be a first-time home buyer with this program as well. We also have our step-up program, which only has 1 down payment assistance program attached to it. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Targeted to our more moderate incomes, so our income requirements are higher on this program. You can either purchase or refinance, or you can be a repeat homeowner as long as you meet the income and house price guidelines. Next slide, please. You can click through this one too. So this is just an illustration of the difference between the 2 programs, a kind of an overview of the income limits for the different programs. As you can see, the Step Up program has a higher income level. So even if a first-time home buyer, if you have a first-time home buyer, they would still be able.
Cheryl, do you want to turn off your camera, maybe, if that will help?
Okay, sorry about that. They're doing roll all construction right in front of my house, so sorry about that. The greater Minnesota and metro areas are listed there as well. Is that better, Anissa?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, next slide. So our income limits, families can qualify, or homeowners can qualify under our guidelines for the 11 county metro area. Our income limits can go up to 104,009. Step up, as I indicated before, is a little higher at 156,800. And then there's different qualifications depending on where you're located throughout the state. Next slide, please. Our purchase prices are very generous, and you can use a duplex on this program as well. And duplexes are great for wealth creation. The purchase price limits are listed for the 11 county metro and then the balance of state as well. Next slide. So to participate in our program as a first-time home buyer, you have to get one of our loans to be eligible for the down payment assistance. And we ask that all of our borrowers have $1,000 or 1% of the purchase price, whichever is lower, into the transaction. So that is required. And then the loan can be requested in amounts of 100 or more. Our definition of a first-time home buyer, and you can just click through that, that's fine.
Okay.
So our definition is that the potential homeowner can have had an interest in a principal residence for the past 3 years, so they can't have owned a home in the past 3 years. They can have held an interest in a loan, but if it's been past 3 years, then they do qualify as a first-time home buyer again. Next slide, please. If the income is over the first-time home buyer limit or the startup income, they can use a step up. So that's an option too, because that will be based on qualifying income only. So there's lots of options depending on income and what folks are purchasing to use our products. Next slide, please. And this is just another illustration of the different options under the different programs. I'm going to start to talk about the down payment assistance loan options. Under startup, you have an option of the monthly payment loan and the deferred payment and deferred payment plus loan. Under step up, you can get the monthly payment loan as well. The monthly payment loan goes with our step up program, and you're able to use that for a 10-year term. So it's 10-year term. The interest rate is the same as your first mortgage. So you'll always know what your payment is. And the amount that you can get under the monthly payment loan is up to $17,000 in down payment assistance, which is helpful because that's one of the barriers that we see. Usually with our BIPOC communities is the lack of down payment assistance. So having these amounts available is really helpful in purchasing a home. You can also layer assistance as well. So that's a really good feature of our programs. The maximum that you can get with down payment assistance under the deferred option is the deferred payment loan plus. They have to meet the income guidelines of our programs, and they also have to meet 2 of the 4 criteria as illustrated here. So they could access a deferred loan, which is no payments. You just pay it off if you should move, sell, or refinance your property. So you don't have a payment with this loan, and you can get the maximum amount of $15,000 if you're utilizing the deferred payment plus loan. And this statistic I just wanted to add in here too. In 2020, 34% of our loans went to Black and Indigenous and people of color. That's a strong goal and a mission-based goal that we have at the agency. Our goal for this year is 40%, and I think we're etching ever so closely to it. I think we're at 37%. So just really trying to close that disparity gap that we have in home ownership in our communities of color. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, homebuyer education is required under our program guidelines for first-time homebuyers. That service is available with the Minnesota Homeownership Center. They have 3 options available that you can do your requirement for first-time homebuyer education. Home stretch education, but you could do I don't know if they're doing in person anymore. They're probably just still doing online or Zoom like everybody else is doing. Or they can do framework, which is the online version of homebuyer education, and then Realizing the Dream is a community-specific down payment program. We also have a program called our Homeownership Capacity Program. This program was developed when we were really trying to look at that disparity gap and figure out what some of the barriers are for home ownership. And what happened is we decided that some of these barriers was due to lack of financial education. Down payment, of course, is one of them. And then we thought it would be helpful if we had a program that took a deeper dive into homebuyer education and really try to change the behavior and budgeting and those type of things to really get people primed for purchasing homes. So we developed the Homeownership Capacity Program back in 2014. It consists of nonprofits preparing low-income renters and households of color with the goal of home ownership. And it also teaches them to be sustainable. So it's not just to purchase the home, they also offer ways to stay on track after you purchase the home after you purchase your property as well. It's an intensive financial education and coaching, but it's an extremely beneficial program and it's really helping us work towards closing that gap. Next slide, please. These are some of the things that homeownership capacity can help increase their credit score. Also, the counselor goes through, they develop budgets with their clients and ways that they can increase their credit score. Also works with behavior, as I spoke of before, and then sustaining home ownership, which is really important. We not only want them to purchase, but we want them to maintain and stay in our home as well. The good thing about this program too is that we're serving 87% of our clients participating in this program are from households of color. Our next program I want to talk about is for folks that already have a home and need some improvements, or maybe they purchased something that wasn't quite what they really wanted and they want to make some changes. Minnesota Housing offers the Fix Up Loan Program. It's affordable fixed rate interest, which is pretty good for home improvement loans. Usually some of those are not fixed rate and they have balloon payments at the end. So this is, you always know what your payments are. The loans can be anywhere between $2,000 and $75,000, depending on what your improvement is. There's no prepayment penalty, so you can pay this off early if you need to. And the best thing about this is that you can hire a contractor or you can do the work yourself. So it's a great option for those who maybe want to get rid of the shag carpet or install an extra bedroom or whatever, this is a program to do that. Next slide, please. Our income limits are listed below. If it's an unsecured loan, you're looking at a little over 156,800 for income, with a maximum loan amount of 25,000. On a secured option, you have a lower income limit at 156. I'm sorry, the same income limit at 156,800, but you have a higher loan amount. You can go up to 75,000. And then we have no income requirement for accessibility or energy loans. And those are all maxed at 25,000. So moving on, I want to talk about programs that Minnesota has available for those who have had financial issues due to COVID. We're currently in the process with rolling out our Home Help Minnesota program. It was established under the American Rescue Act of 2021 and as a result of COVID. Funding to states from Treasury were based on a allocation formula that was used. Minnesota was lucky enough to get 128 million. The purpose of this funding source is to mitigate financial hardships associated with the COVID-19 pandemic by preventing mortgage delinquencies, defaults, foreclosures, and displacement. The key thing to remember about this program is that homeowners would have had to experience financial hardship after January 21st of 2020. Currently, we're developing the program now. We have RFPs out and we're just kind of piecing the program together. We don't have a target date for taking applications yet, but that's to come. But we are focusing this program based on the following program principles: human-centered. We're using an intentional race equity strategy in designing our program and delivery, focused on mitigating displacement of homeowners due to financial hardship as a result of COVID. We're trying to make the program straightforward so there's no stress, it's not too complicated. And it takes some of the uncertainty out of the process of just applying for funds. Accountability, we want to make sure that we are transparent and timely and flexible. And then engagement, which we really feel is the key piece to this, is getting information out to folks that this program exists and giving them resources to help them complete application. So we currently have an RFP out right now for nonprofit organizations who can help us get the word out to our targeted communities on how to access our program. So you can look for that information on how to apply on the website. We're looking to target households at 100% AMI or less, and that's by Sizer County. The maximum household assistance will be capped at 35,000. It will be for owner occupied, and it has to be a primary residence, and it can be up to a 4-unit dwelling. And again, remembering that you have to have experienced that hardship after January 21st of 2020. The assistance will be reinstatement assistance, loan modification, and then assistance with taxes, insurance, and homeowners association fees as well. And then there'll also be legal services offered as well. And then the last thing I want to cover that's available right now, this program is up and running, is Rent Help. I don't know, a lot of people have probably heard about it, but it's a program to support stable housing for renters impacted by the COVID epidemic. You can talk to a trained expert, or if there are language barriers, by calling 211. There's also a link on our website to get additional information, but I'm going to go through a couple of slides just to give you some brief information. Next slide. We've received over 500 million in federal funding for 18 months of rental experience that would cover rent, utilities, and other housing expenses, and then future rent as well, 3 months at a time. Housing that's covered under this program would be apartments, single-family homes, rented, manufactured homes, manufactured home lot rent, hotel and motel stays if it's the renter's primary residence, and other informal lease agreements, but those would be subject to review. Who's eligible? To be eligible, you have to be a renter who lives in Minnesota, whose income has been affected by the pandemic. Your income has to be under 80% of the area median income, and income limits are based on the county in which you lived and the number of people who live in your household. You can find a chart for this on our website, which I'll be showing you in just a bit. Next slide, please. Also, information on how to apply. You can apply online at our designated website, renthelpmn.org. And you can scroll down and you can see renters apply now. And then you can actually do paper requests. You want to call into that 211 number to request the paper option. And then any additional help, again, you can get from 211 as well. We have materials available in Hmong, Somali, Spanish, and English. And there's also a link on the slide here if you need additional assistance. Next slide. So here's our website. So if you want more detailed information about our programs, it's all listed on the website. There's a special designated area for homeowners, and there's also a section that's available for COVID. All of the COVID programs are on there as well. So feel free to access that if you have any issues or concern or have interest in any of the programs. Simply go to mnhousing.gov. And I guess I can take questions after that.
You finished it on time, Cheryl. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You could either raise your hand or use the chat function to ask the question that. One thing I wanted to ask Cheryl is that are there any Sharia law-based loans available through these programs that you presented?
We don't have one with Minnesota Housing yet. It's something that the agency is aware of the need and have been working to try to get to a program that we can try to see if we can run our programs through. Casey, are you still on the call? Can you give an update on the Sharia compliant?
Yep, as Cheryl mentioned, we are exploring the ability to be able to provide a first mortgage option that is non-interest bearing. But in the chat, I also listed a resource through the Homeownership Opportunity Alliance, which is linked, that does have some resources with non-interest bearing financing. In addition, the down payment assistance that Cheryl was discussing earlier, that needs to be paired with our first mortgage startup and step up. But through our Community Impact Fund, there are a number of organizations that are receiving impact funds from the agency, which are 0% deferred down payment assistance loans that can be paired with non-Minnesota Housing First mortgages. So those would be non-interest bearing that could be combined with other products right now. We also have a rehab loan program, which is a 0% interest up to $27,000 that is forgivable over 15 years to do improvements, health and safety improvements, accessibility improvements that also improve the livability of properties for households that are at 30% area median income and below.
Thank you. I see Edmundo has his hand raised. Edmundo, go ahead, please. Edmundo, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes, my question was about ITIN loans. Do you have any ITIN loan programs available?
We don't currently have any ITIN loans available, but the Homeownership Opportunity Alliance is also working on putting together a resource that details out the ITIN loans that are available within the state.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Margreta Getawa said, is there a minimum credit requirement for these loans?
Yes, there would be. So I believe it depends on what loan program you're going with. Our base is at 640 credit score that we need, but depending on what loan program you choose, if it's a conventional loan, I think that the credit score has to be at a 680. So depending on which program you go with and the underlying loan product, so whatever the underlying program product is, FHA, VA conventional, we follow those guidelines as well.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I'll share the PowerPoint presentation to anybody that's interested in. I see Linda had requested it. Linda, I'll send that to you. If there are any more questions or comments, definitely. We'll move on to our next speaker, Cheryl and Casey. Thank you so much for
Thank you for having
us. Yeah, this was really nice. And of course, anyone who's interested in, getting hold of Cheryl or Casey, please reach out to me. Or, if Cheryl and Casey, you feel comfortable, you could also put your contact information as well.
Yep, I'll drop it in the chat.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And our next presenter is Beef 2 Adams. Beef 2 Adam, who is here with us from the Department of Public Safety to talk about the Violence Prevention Awareness Month and resources available to victims of violence and their loved ones. Beef 2, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Try to share my. Sorry about that. Can you see it?
Yeah.
I think I have about less than 30 minutes, so try to spend 15 minutes on this and allow time for folks to ask questions. Thank you so much for having me. Assistant Commissioner, my name is Beef Tuber. I'm Adam. I'm with the Department of Public Safety, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Wanted to come spend time with you all today and talk about Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which is this month in October. I think sort of just to get started, I know that a lot of folks are coming from very different worlds, but domestic violence is something that I think we've talked about in many different spaces. What it looks like and what it's defined as is something I'll go through briefly. So domestic violence is not just physical violence. It can look like emotional abuse, psychological abuse, economic, and more forms. This definition I think is helpful for folks, so I will read it aloud. Domestic violence is the willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, and/or abusive behavior as part of a systematic pattern of power and control perpetrated by one intimate partner against another, and includes the sort of various ways we've talked about. I think, you might be saying, what does the BCA do specifically around domestic violence? We are a state agency, but we provide investigative and specialized law enforcement services to prevent and solve crimes in partnership with law enforcement and public safety agencies across the state. So really, to give you a specific example of how we most frequently interact with people who have been victimized by domestic violence is by way of our investigations division. So because we serve statewide, a lot of our special agents will work with local law enforcement agencies, maybe on a domestic homicide, which is where a loved one has passed and been killed by their partner or a family member. And in those crimes, they will contact myself, and we'll also partner with local agencies that are serving survivors in a wide capacity to make sure that they're getting the support they need. So that's sort of how we will see it on a daily and unfortunately throughout the year in the most extreme, case, which is a loss of life. Why do we have a Domestic Violence Awareness Month? Just really some quick statistics for you all is everybody knows somebody who has experienced domestic violence or has been impacted themselves. This is not a new topic or new issue for you all. I think maybe just the language around it. Unfortunately, it is such a normalized crisis really in our society. So about 1 in 4 women have experienced domestic violence and about 1 in 10 men. On average, nearly 20 people each minute are assaulted by an intimate partner. So if you were to do the math, which you don't have to because I know it, that's about 10 million people a year. And again, these numbers are specifically for intimate partner. So we talked about domestic violence could also be siblings or family members who are in the home as well. In 2020, we know in Minnesota that there's at least 30 domestic homicides. So Violence Free Minnesota does an annual report, and unfortunately the numbers are not getting lower in our state. So I think it's important to highlight that as well. And then another thing that is, hopefully helpful is there's a lot of calls that are being placed to domestic violence hotlines and shelters across the nation and state daily. And so we know this is really something that is needed. Information around domestic violence, awareness, and how to get people the support that they need. And I also just wanted to point out, unfortunately, like many of the crime or health disparities that we see, Native American women and Black women do experience higher rates of domestic violence. So I think the question folks always get is like, what do you do if you know somebody is experiencing domestic violence, whether it's a sibling, a friend, a coworker, whether you see something or you don't. Really, the sound really basic, but they're also important to be clear. I think the most important thing is to listen. If they're able to be in a place where they even feel comfortable disclosing what they're experiencing, the most important thing really to do is to listen, to be supportive, know what the resources are for somebody that might be experiencing domestic violence. Looking up resources or trying to even know where to go first is really overwhelming. And so if you can know a few yourself or even one number, that's really a way that you can help someone who might come to you. Don't judge. There's a lot of fear and shame around domestic violence. And so if somebody is, trusting you with their story, judging them, even if you think, you couldn't imagine yourself in that situation, it's really important to not to, because that might have been a barrier for them to share in the first place. Also believe them. That's another barrier for folks not being willing or comfortable to share with anyone, the fear that they won't be believed. And then this one is create a safety plan. So what that means specifically for you as somebody who might know someone who's experiencing domestic violence, but maybe you're not a social worker, somebody who's trained in trauma-based response and how to serve them sort of collectively, is, so if I have a friend who tells me they're in this situation, they're going to call me when something happens in the home, and we have a word, right, that I know means that they need assistance or that they want me to call for somebody to come help, whether that's law enforcement or a community response team. And so thinking creatively of what a safety plan means for somebody that in terms of how they can call you. There are people who will text their friend or loved one a word, which means that they need help. And so I think even being willing to do this for somebody really helps them feel comfortable to maybe take that next step, which might be seeking supportive services. So these are some sort of broad pathways to seeking support. If somebody's willing to talk to their family and friends about what's going on, that is them seeking support. And I think something that we should be celebrating. It's hard for people to tell their story or to talk about what's going on. Somebody might speak to their coworkers or classmates. They might go to this community organization that specifically serves survivors, right? So if you're in Minneapolis, maybe that's Tubman. If you're in Bloomington, maybe it's Cornerstone. There's so many organizations across the state. Reporting to law enforcement is also a pathway, but there might be barriers for somebody. They might be fearful of law enforcement, maybe regarding their status, or they've been feared and discouraged to go to the police. The court process, right? We know there's a lot of barriers there. So if somebody is willing to report to law enforcement, letting them know that they could go with a community advocate as well, right? Restraining orders are also a resource for folks. This also requires going to court, right? And so making sure that when we're talking to people about domestic violence, they feel like they're supported and aware of what the process will be and don't feel like they're getting surprises along the way. I worked with a lot of people in the past who thought, if they reported one time, like that would be it and it would stop. Making sure somebody knows if they report what the process would look like. If a county attorney charges, if it's a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor, if the city attorney charges, they might have to testify. It's important that they don't feel overwhelmed at sort of the beginning of their process if they're seeking support, but also that they don't feel blindsided by the process. U visas, specifically for folks who are mixed immigration status, if you've experienced a crime, you may be able to apply for a U visa, and there's a lot of organizations in the state that'll help somebody apply for that, and we would too at the state. And so knowing that that is an option for folks. Shelter, there's domestic violence shelters across the state of Minnesota. I'll share the information of phone numbers and places to go later, but knowing that if somebody's ready to leave the home, shelter might be an option. Maybe going to stay with their friend or family isn't. They could seek safe housing at a shelter. It's important to also know that shelter is often temporary, but the folks who work in shelters are prepared to find that long-term support, right? And so knowing that could be an option for the person as well. And then other places are cultural spaces and community convenings. Somebody may go to the mosque or to their weekly, gathering with their friends and peers, and that might be where they're seeking support. And so just thinking sort of broadly of how we can all make sure that we're aware of the basics to support somebody. The other part is really trying to understand how a survivor might feel. Like I said, we know there's a lot of people who've experienced domestic violence themselves, whether it's in their family or in their own relationship. But there's such a rush of emotions, and I don't need to read all of these because I'll send this as well. But it's very difficult for somebody to feel ready to, disclose what has happened or even report, and they might not also ever. And so trying to understand how they are feeling allows you to support them in a more honest way, in a way that feels good for them. A lot of barriers are feeling like you don't have support for your family or friend, sort of cultural or religious implications. You know, if you say that this is happening at home, a lot of folks, you know, might start talking about you. You might feel like you've dishonored your family. You might be worrying about the kids. There's sort of all of these barriers that somebody is thinking they're in their head every day as they're also experiencing trauma and abuse. So trying to be mindful of those as well. So I think I wanted to highlight this sort of for us is how does domestic violence might look like for mixed status families and communities, knowing that domestic violence does impact everybody. But for some folks in my family who maybe are in the process of getting their citizenship, or there are folks that are, you know, marrying and just unsure, they're in a new place and you know, not really sure what the process is or have additional fears. It might look a little different. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes on that. Isolation might look like abusive partners trying to prevent you from learning English or communicating and interacting with others, especially anyone with a shared background. Intimidation, you know, destroying legal documents or holding on to somebody's documents and cards, your driver's license. It could be preventing somebody from trying to get their driver's license, right? Threats of deportation. Unfortunately, we often see this, you know, if you report me, you know, law enforcement will deport you. That's a huge fear for folks, and knowing how that sort of language might come up. Manipulating around your citizenship or residency status, financial abuse, trying to get you fired from your job or saying that they'll report you if somebody in your family is undocumented, and leveraging children. So again, these tactics are not unique to immigrant or refugee families or families of mixed status, but there is an added component and trauma for these communities. And so I just wanted to highlight that for folks. There is a story of Adela's story that you'll all be able to watch. It's about 5 minutes. She's a Peruvian survivor who experienced domestic violence in her home country, fled to the United States to escape that domestic violence, and unfortunately experienced it here as well. And it really walks you through her story, and she shares it in a way that if you haven't worked with somebody who's experienced domestic violence, or maybe you have, her story allows people, I think, to know how they might be able to access help as she shares that. Well, some resources that are at the state, we have the Office of Justice programs at DPS. They have sort of several avenues, but there can be financial assistance for victims of crime and domestic violence, information and referrals. So like I said, there's a lot of programs across the state, and OJP has a list of all of those orgs. And then knowing what your crime victims' rights are and if they're being violated. The other one is the Crime Victim Reparations Board. So if somebody experiences domestic violence and reports it, there may be a lot of associated costs, from hospital bills to therapy bills, that if you apply for a claim with the state with reparations, you may be eligible to get assistance, some financial assistance for the trauma as well. And then, like I said, there's a statewide directory. So these are just some of the many community-based services, but I wanted to highlight them. So Minnesota has a day one crisis line. Feel free to write this number down. I can put it in the chat later as well. But if you call this number, it's staffed 24 hours a day. They are able to access all shelter beds across the state of Minnesota and see if somebody is able to get in here, or if they need to go to a part of Minnesota that's maybe a couple hours away for fear, because that's what's accessible. They're able to sort of help folks along the phone. People can also call if they're worried to call the police and want to call with an advocate on the line. So there's a lot of different avenues for using day one. Violence Free Minnesota is a statewide coalition against domestic violence and relationship abuse. They have a lot of member programs, over 90, and so they're also a resource to you. Fumalani is an organization specifically working with African and refugee communities experiencing domestic violence. There's their phone number, you can call anytime. Mending the Sacred Hoop is out of Duluth. That does connect with folks in the metro as well. Clues has multiple locations. This is their 24-hour crisis line. SEWA and Asian Women United. So these are some of the resources I just wanted to highlight for you all, and I'll make sure that Anissa gets the PowerPoint as well. I know that I talked really fast, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if folks have questions.
Thank you, Beef 2. I see that there's a question in the chat box that is there any focus on DM within the LGBTQI plus community in DPS?
Yeah, thank you, Christina. That's a great question. There's actually specific people in different parts of DPS that have worked with LGBTQ plus communities. I myself have, but for a survivor who's seeking assistance, you know, it may be out front, which is maybe the appropriate organization to refer them to, but really working with that survivor to see where they might feel safe and where they don't. There, I would say, are organizations that people have said they would like to not work with because they know somebody there who knows them from their community. So being able to work with them to get them assistance at a place that actually feels safe to reach out to.
Thank you, Beef 2. And if you can share the slides, I'll share with some of the folks that are interested in. And the other thing I wanted to ask if you could mention is also some of the materials that the Department of Public Safety had translated into different languages, which people that do not speak English may have access to. Yeah.
So if you go to the DPS website, I'll put the link in specifically for the Office of Justice programs. They have a lot of materials that are translated into different languages. So one of them, for example, is the crime victim rights. It lets people know if you've experienced victimization, these are the things that you truly do have a right to. And they're available in English, Spanish, Hmong, Somali, and I think we're working to get them in additional languages as well. But in addition to those, there's also pamphlets that help you know if you are testifying in a criminal case, say the person has decided to report and feels comfortable and supported around that process. What do you need to know about testifying? How do you prepare yourself for that? If you're experienced financial loss, right? What are the avenues in which you have to do that? It can be very cumbersome and stressful for people to keep receipts and have all of the documents to show this is what happened, this is what I need reimbursement from. So these documents are meant to help folks with that. So I can put the link in the chat here.
Thank you. See, Emmanuel had asked, how do you handle DV regarding threats of deportation? Are legal assistance provided to victims in addition to other resources?
Yeah, that's a great
violence. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. So as for myself, if there's somebody I'm working with that is being threatened of being deported, we can start the U visa application process with them. I will say with the U visas, for somebody who've experienced a crime, there is a component that says they cooperate with law enforcement. And so there will come a point in the process where that application is sent to the law enforcement agency that the survivor reported to. So if it was, I don't know, think of a city in a different state. If it was Springfield, Illinois, that law enforcement entity, like whoever the detective or chief was, will get the survivor's U visa application and they'll say Beef 2 was, you know, participating in the investigation or not. And so I think people have to know that that is a question that exists. I think there's a lot of efforts to see if the response can be with advocates and law enforcement. It's not a barrier, but something for people to know. I've certainly worked with folks who were in the process of getting a U visa. The application came to the law enforcement entity. The law enforcement officer hadn't heard from the survivor in a while, but I had, right? I'd been working with them weekly. And so they called and said, are you still working with this person? And I said, yep. And we made sure that moved along. I say all of that to say it's really important that folks are working collaboratively with their advocates and law enforcement if they do seek this path, because you never want to see that somebody got marked. No, they weren't when they were, right? But maybe their number changed, or maybe they moved. And then for legal assistance, so I'm not an attorney, so I couldn't provide somebody legal assistance, but I would connect them to a place. Standpoint is a great legal resource in the state of Minnesota that provides free legal assistance to survivors who are seeking, whether it's domestic violence, sexual violence, or trafficking. They have a lot of experience working with U visas and T visas, which is for trafficking, but still important to note because you might be trafficked by your partner, right? And so knowing that as well. I hope it answered your question, Emmanuel. If not, just put another one in and I'll answer it.
Thank you, Beef too. I see that also Farhia asked, she said that there aren't enough shelters for victims in Minnesota, not enough beds. What's being done to ensure more shelters for victims? And the questioner that Hotline asks is mostly likely for clients to be in dangerous versus prevention.
Yeah, for here, great question. I think we're always advocating for more assistance for survivor-based programming. I know that the American Rescue Plan dollars that OJP has some funding that they're going to be, distributing. I think this fall. I think some of these applications might be open still, so I can send that. But so the grant funding is broad, so that people could expand shelters, they could expand services. We're always advocating for more culturally specific programming and services, right? Because we know that you don't need these barriers on top of this. And so that is sometimes what folks need. But I agree with you, there's never enough beds. I will say, depending on if the person is working with somebody on the phone, an advocate on the phone, they may be able to get them hotel vouchers for the night. And so as somebody who maybe is working with somebody experiencing DV or knows, I think it's not, quite the right thing to say, but knowing how to advocate for yourself. I do need, I know that the shelters are full, but I do need a safe place tonight. Do you have hotel vouchers? Again, that's really a lot to put on a survivor, and say that the advocate, whether it's me in a state capacity or somebody in a community organization, we're there to do that. I worked in community nonprofits with survivors for years before I came to the state, and that's what we did. We called too, and we asked and advocated to see if we could get somebody put in a shelter or hotel for a few nights. So I know it's not perfect. I do think we're aware, but we have to continue to ask for, not just more shelters, but I think also eliminating some of the barriers and issues in our society that are allowing for folks to come seek shelter, annually, and invest in disrupting the cycle as well. I don't know if I missed any other questions.
Thank you so much, Biftu. Yeah, and I see Emmanuel said that if you can share your contact information. And Sam wrote, most people, especially men going through domestic violence, don't talk or confide for fear of community ridicule, but suffer internally. They are in pain, and it's very stressful. Do you have culturally appropriate resources for hotel vouchers or shelters specific for men?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam, and thank you. There's some on the list of the victim service providers across the state that specifically will do like housing for men. I think Tubman has, I don't know what part of the state you're in, but I believe Tubman has a couple of groups that are specifically for male survivors. And for vouchers, so if somebody were to call the Day One crisis line and is looking to get into shelter, but specifically identifies as male, these are questions that they ask on the phone. And so I know what I've seen done in the past is if this shelter is specifically for folks identifying as female, but there's a male survivor on the phone, don't want to just leave folks ever, right? Want to make sure they get somewhere safe. So they would put them in a hotel for as long as they could. And so it's not perfect, right? I think we need to see more shelters that are specifically for men and male identifying folks, but that's sort of how they've been servicing thus far. But I'm going to put the service provider list in here for you.
Great, thank you, Beef Stew. And then if you could share these slides, I'll share with the participants that had requested it. And also, Beef Stew will be presenting at the community calls with Maureen Ramirez. I'm not sure exactly when that will be. And also sometime this month, you'll be presenting at the biweekly immigration forum where Edmundo and Michelle Rivero had organized it. So it's biweekly, and looking forward to perhaps if you could cover additionally when you present there, like how to deal with some of the immigrant and refugee communities that are ostracized for reporting, perpetrators, because that they are, isolated from the community when they stand up for their rights and seek legal representation and support. And that has been really across the board with immigrants and refugees. But thank you so much. We're in time to move on to our final speakers. Thank you so much, Beef Stew. So last but not least, Justin Neiman, Gina Amaker, and Jesse Fronek are presenting from the Department of Revenue and have a new outreach program that they would like to share with the public. Please welcome. Oh, you're here already. Great. Thank you. Floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you to all the presenters that are presenting today. They're all wonderful topics and extremely great presentations. So thank you for sharing. One of the things that I want to talk about, and my name is Justin Neiman, I'm Assistant Commissioner at Revenue, one of them anyways, at Revenue. And one of the things that we do at Revenue, our main goal is to help fund so many wonderful programs that we have that you've heard about today. So that's why we are so passionate about, collecting tax dollars for the state of Minnesota. So I'm going to start talking about our vision. So the vision of the department is that everyone reports, pays, and receives the right amount, no more, no less. And that really supports our mission. And our mission here at the department is working together to fund the future for all of Minnesota. When we talk about our mission, that is why it's so important when we bring in tax dollars, so that we can fund so many wonderful programs, provide so many wonderful services for all the citizens of our state. A couple of things I want to talk about regarding our tax system. And the backbone of our tax system is voluntary compliance. We believe at the department that the overwhelming majority of our customers, and I use that word intentionally because we're not taxpayers, we're customers. You are our customers. We have external customers, we have internal customers, but you are our customers. We believe that the overwhelming majority of our customers want to do the right thing and pay the right amount, so that we can fund all of these wonderful services like at DPS, at DEED, at all these other state agencies we have, and provide local assistance as well. How do we support our mission, vision, and values here at the department? As we talk about our strategies, and I'm not going to go through all of our strategies, but intentionally at Revenue, we put our first strategy is providing customers with information, education, and services. And that's really what we're going to touch on here today. And that's why we're so excited about the project that our Sales and Use Tax Division, who I'm going to turn it over to here in a minute, this is a brainchild of their division to provide additional information for our customers so that they have the information that they need. I want to talk a little bit about why it's so important that we make meaningful connections like this today. It's so that all of our customers have the information that they need to voluntarily comply. I talked about voluntary compliance being the backbone of our tax system, and most of the money that is collected by the state is done voluntarily. Now, we do have some compliance work, but the majority of our money, like I said, comes in voluntarily. And we also want to make sure that the information that we do provide externally, whether it's on our website, whether it's through presentations, whether it's on our phones, emails, what have you, makes sense and is easily understood. Finally, one of the things that we're going to talk about today is, making sure that we're listening to what our customers are having to say. Like I said, the information that we're providing externally is helpful, is easily understood, so that people understood what they're supposed to do. And finally, recognizing where we have gaps. So when we talk about gaps, is there something with an industry guide or a policy or a procedure that we have here at the department that doesn't fit all situations? So helping identify what those gaps are so that we can address them through the legislature, or we can do that internally as well with some of our things. But the most important thing that we do here at the department is making sure that everybody, whether it's a bar restaurant, whether it's a legislator, whether it's a tax professional, has the information that they need to comply on the front end versus having for us to come out and do an audit on the back end. Our ultimate goal is to, like I've said multiple times already, is to make sure that people have the information that they need, and they're put on the right path so that they can voluntarily comply, so that we don't have to do a compliance audit on the back end. So I'm going to turn it over to Gina and Jesse, and they're going to walk through the program. And we're really excited about this pilot program that they've put together. And we're looking forward to getting the feedback from that program and tweaking it wherever we need to and expanding it where we possibly can. So thank you for your time today, and I will turn it over to Gina.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate that that context of what we're trying to do here at Revenue. And thank you, Anissa, for inviting us. This is really exciting for us. We really appreciate being included in this effort today. Okay, to get us going, I will just tell you a little bit of information before Jesse gets into the details of the outreach efforts. Minnesota sales and use tax is considered a trust tax, and I'm sure many of you have heard that term. And what that means is basically the tax is on the sale and is paid by the customer. So it's not actually a tax on the restaurant, but they're the ones that have to basically take the money and turn it in. So generally, sales of prepared food at restaurants are subject to sales tax and sometimes local taxes as well. The restaurant charges sales tax to their customers on all the prepared food, no matter if the customers pay by cash, check, credit card. The restaurant holds on to the customer's tax until they have to file their sales and use tax return with us. And then, okay, so there are a few exemptions, I should say, not exceptions, exemptions that could apply, which could relieve the restaurant of the obligation to collect the tax on certain transactions. And there also are some sales that restaurants could make which would not meet the definition of prepared food. So like if you go to a pizza place and you get one of those take and make pizzas to go, something like that, I guess. So we're not going to get into the details of those things, but we do have a whole variety of resources on our website about about prepared food and what exactly is taxable and what exemptions there are from it. So to start with, what are the challenges specifically for our small restaurants? We know there's quite a few, and these are kind of the ones that we'll talk about. For one, the focus on operations and not on record keeping. Lots of them are, obviously we have a labor shortage. People are short on staff, so they might not have time and people dedicated to do their accounting and their bookwork for them. And then also because, like we said, it's a trust tax,
if they don't like actually separate that money out and put it somewhere to the side, like this is just for paying my sales tax, it could, you know, there's a risk there that it could end up inadvertently being used to pay other expenses. And then the other thing is because these small restaurants, they don't actually have to file very often. Most of them are either annual or quarterly filers. And so they might forget to file and they might forget to pay. And every time you don't file and pay or you're late, you can get more penalties and interest. So that's kind of part of the reason why we think that with all the complications with prepared food and the reasons why it's difficult sometimes for restaurants to comply, we came up with this outreach effort. So now I'll turn it over to Jesse Fronick to talk about our outreach program.
Thanks, Gina. Thanks, Justin. We thought it'd be helpful just to throw in some high level, background information on, Revenue's mission as a whole, and a little bit of information on restaurants themselves before I jumped into the actual team and project that we put together. So the initial concept for restaurant outreach was discussed at the management level within our division in fall of 2020. The restaurant outreach team was formed in January of 2021. Our team includes 2 supervisor sponsors, 1 team lead, and 8 sales and use tax employees. All team members have experience in the restaurant industry issues, whether that be through doing compliance work such as audits or working in the phone rooms and answering call-in questions from our customers. Our team began regular meetings after forming to draft a mission statement and start planning our outreach process. So the mission of our restaurant outreach team is to educate small restaurant owners and encourage long-term compliance. Justin covered this earlier. The vast majority of people really try to do things right, and our team is there to support that effort. This education will take place through non-audit activities, especially now in our current work environment. We're doing everything by phone. The possibility exists that it may be in person in the future, but right now it's all conducted through letter and phone calls. So our actual process. The restaurant outreach team identified a list of potential outreach cases. The list includes independently owned small to medium-sized restaurants. As previously mentioned, larger businesses or chain restaurants often have resources dedicated or staff that are specifically there for record keeping and accounting. Our goal with our team being somewhat, kind of small, is to reach the businesses that we feel could benefit the most from our outreach. So we're starting with those small to medium-sized businesses. On August 5th of 2021, the Restaurant Outreach Project was formally announced in a Gov Delivery message. For those not familiar with Gov Delivery messages, that's a medium that we use to push out announcements to certain businesses. In this case, we sent it to all the small and medium-sized restaurants, and we also sent it to tax professionals that subscribe to receive those messages. We want any business that has an accountant that helps them out. We wanted the accountants to also know what this project was because it is brand new. So that's I won't read the Gov Delivery message word for word. That's essentially what we're covering in this presentation. So we announced it on August 5th. So after the Gov Delivery message, businesses selected for restaurant outreach will be notified by our team through mail. The outreach team member will conduct a phone call with the restaurant owner. During the call, we will discuss the business and record keeping and explain tax resources available to on the Department of Revenue website. We also want to answer any questions that the owner has. As a part of the phone call, like Justin mentioned earlier, we truly want to engage with the business owners that we reach out to find out what the Department of Revenue can offer to help them be successful. We're not just trying to talk about information. We really want to find out if there's a tool or resource that we haven't thought of or something that we can put together that would make it easier for them. So following that outreach phone call, our team member will send a summary letter to formally close the outreach discussion. So some of it will be generic bullet points with the fact sheets and industry guides listed from the Department of Revenue website, and then some of the other specifics that we discussed with each business. The resources that we plan to discuss with the owners will be basic sales and use tax guide, enrolling in sales and use tax classes, the fact sheets and industry guides that apply, and also e-services information. For those not familiar with e-services, that's the platform that businesses use to file and pay their sales and use tax returns. So the restaurant outreach process is very new. Like I said, we just announced the start of the process in August, and my team has been working to contact their initial assignments since then. So we don't have a lot of completed cases, so we don't have a lot of feedback that I can share with you. Overall, the reception, though, has been very positive from the business owners, and we're excited to continue the outreach. So on this final slide, I've also included some of the basic contact numbers for certain divisions at Revenue. Our website is included in case you know somebody that has a more specific question for a certain tax type. Otherwise, all of these numbers and the resources that I discussed, such as the fact sheets and the industry guides, can be found on the Revenue website. And that's all we have for restaurant outreach. So with that, I can open it up to any questions you have for us.
Thank you so much for presenting. Are there any materials translated to address the needs for business owners or restaurant owners that do not speak English?
There are materials translated on the Department of Revenue website. You can search other languages in the search box, and it'll take you to the page dedicated to those. I think the materials we have translated are in Somali, Spanish, and Hmong. And it's a lot of the basic stuff, you know, what to do if they got a letter, things like that. What we've been working on is in sales tax, we have a lot of information for various different industries and how sales and use tax applies. And not all of that stuff is translated, but we do have a phone line where we can try to connect with an interpreter when it is needed to make sure that the message gets across to our customer.
Thank you so much. Anybody has any more questions or comments? Please feel free to use the chat function or the hand raising option.
I just want to say thank you. Again, like this is a great opportunity for us to engage with you all, and we really want to be viewed as a resource for as many businesses, large, small, doesn't matter, so that we can make sure that everybody is put on the right path, so that we can help serve all of Minnesota. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and if it's okay to share the slides, I'll share with the participants. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that Maureen Ramirez, who is our director for the Office of Economic Opportunities, holds community calls on Wednesdays. So it would be great if one of you can present, as well as Edmundo Lijo and Michelle Rivero, who are St. Paul and Minneapolis directors of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs offices. So they hold also every other week immigration forum, and I'll make the connection, but it would be great. The more people that we can share with the resources available, the more people that can take advantage of.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Sam says, any contact information, please, so we can share with our business restaurant community. Yeah, Sam, I'll share that information and the slides, so that way you could share with your networks and the business owners. I realize there are a lot of business owners that don't speak English, that usually rely on either relatives or children to translate things. So the more that the community leaders can take the lead to share this information and help out with the translations and materials available, the better that they will have access to utilize the services available. And finally, I wanted to mention that in November, we will have the Department of Education and the Office of Higher Education that will be coming to present at the forum and share resources available to the community. And we're doing a little bit different, structure this time, starting with November, where the community leaders or community-based organizations will have a space and time to share updates on what's going on the ground level with the state leaders and anybody else that will be participating in the forum. And with that, I thank to all our presenters today. Thank you so much. Appreciate all the resources that you've shared. And I'll make the connection with Edmundo, Michelle, and Maureen so we continue the education and community engagement with the immigrant and refugee business owners. Thank you so much. And with that, we'll take 9 minutes back. Have a good evening, everyone. And we'll share the blog and also the YouTube videos as well. Thank you. Have a good night.